and welcome to the Week 8 recap of the NPL. I am your host Dave, and I will be going over what happened in the last week. Just looking ahead, a lot of these battles were sweeps, so there probably won't be terribly much to say. So, moving on to the first battle. So here we have the New York Metangs versus Manaphy City. Looking at the team matchup, things look pretty even. It looks like Manaphy City has brought a couple of really good special sweepers such as Sylveon and Starmie and Hydreigon, while the Metangs, on the other hand, have brought to what looks like to be a series of mixed attackers. Well, or what I consider to be mixed attackers, like that Thunderous T. After seeing Hybrid on that Regigigas in that one game, I'm confused of what it could be. So, getting into the battle, some interesting things that I saw was that the Metangs brought a mixed Porygon 2 with things such as Return and Ice Beam. Now, the beginning of the battle was pretty interesting, because Porygon 2 and Gothitelle were battling each other, and Gothitelle tricked a Choice Scarf onto Porygon 2, which actually worked against Manaphy City, because Return actually did a lot of damage, surprisingly, to all of his Pokemon. And, this was a pretty hacksy battle, and Manaphy City was the receiving end of all the hacks, such as critical hit damage from his Porygon 2. I think there were a lot of critical hits that came from Regigigas later in the battle, but I'll get into that soon. Instead of running Hyper Beam on this Regigigas like the last battle, though, he decided to use a Power Fusion stall strategy, which, it's hacksy, but it ended up working very well in his favor. Pretty much what this Regigigas did in the middle of the battle was just set up a substitute, paralyze whatever came in, and also Confuse Ray. Confuse Ray was probably the one move that won him this battle, because every single time that a Pokemon on Manaphy City teams was confused, he always seemed to get the Confusion Axe and just hit himself. It was truly the most devastating move in this battle. Of course, there were other forms of hacks, such as, Draco Meteor missing, Stone Edge missing, and, of course, 3 or 4 critical hits that mattered against Manaphy City's team. So, all in all, I would have to say that it was a pretty bizarre battle. I definitely do think that Manaphy City was really unlucky with all the hacks and stuff, but all in all, this gave the New York Metangs a 5-0 victory. Moving on to the next battle. So here we have the Montreal Cavalians versus the Phoenix Sunkerns. This is one of those battles where I'm probably not going to have much to say because, to put it bluntly, it was a sweep. Looking at the team matchup, it looks like both teams are very even with each other. Manaphy is pretty devastating to the Cavalians team, and Weavile can also be proved to be pretty devastating, especially against that Latias, Gengar, and possibly Thundurus if it can outspeed it. So, things were going kind of okay in the beginning of the battle. Midway through the battle, though, it was, I believe, to be Slowbro, the Cavalian Slowbro versus Cheese Boy's Manaphy, and I think the turning point of this battle was where the Cavalians just let the Slowbro in and tried to Psyshock the Manaphy to death, which didn't exactly work all that well. As a result, the Manaphy ended up getting, I want to say, either 2 or 3 Tail Glows up, just completely setting up against the Cavalians, and it just either spam Scald or Hidden Power Fire for that Ferrothorn. Nothing can really stand up to a setup Manaphy like that, unless you have a pretty hard counter, in which case the Cavalians didn't really have one, aside from maybe, possibly Charizard X, but that thing ended up taking a ton of Stealth Rock damage at the end of the battle, and I think it just easily got picked off. I do think he should have saved Weavile and Excadrill for the very end, because, as I was watching the battle, his Ferrothorn used a Sandstorm strategy, which isn't all too common, but it does work well for his own team. So, also another thing I noticed in the battle, I noticed that I I think he was trying to purposely try to hack the Manaphy with like flinches from Iron Head from Excadrill, which I disagree with. I don't think he should have gone for Iron Head expecting the flinch hacks. It is never a good idea to rely on hacks like that. So, at the end of the battle, Manaphy ended up getting a pretty big sweep at the end with, I think it was either Thundurus or Gengar finishing up the battle for him with a, and this resulted in a 5-0 victory for the Phoenix Sunkerns. Moving on to the next battle, we have the San Antonio Swampards versus the Toronto Star Raptors. Looking at the team matchup, I mean, it looks like Talonflame didn't have a good matchup at all against this other team, especially with that Heatran, Skarmory, and Landorus in the back like that. It just seems to get walled pretty easily based on just from looking at the team matchup. Another thing is that Jolt didn't really have anything to do with that Celebi in the back aside from Talonflame, which gets pretty much walled by the other team as well. This game, it started off pretty hacksy in the beginning, and it really didn't work well for Jolt at all because it left him in a 3-6 position. Pretty much I think he was left with, I think the three things that he were left with could be easily picked off by that Choice Scarfed Heatran in the back. So, I don't know, a trend that I've seen in this week is that a lot of battlers tend to be having bad luck or getting swept to death. Or getting swept to death because of bad luck. I don't know. But all in all, I mean, I do think hacks played a pretty big role in this battle. So that's unfortunate for Jolt. It kind of killed his current winning streak of 7-0, which is all good things have to come to an end eventually. And this resulted in a 5-0 victory for the San Antonio Swampards. But anyway, moving on. In this battle we have the Atlanta Braviaries versus the St. Louis Reshiram. So pretty much this is the only battle that wasn't being dominated by a sweep or hacks. So that's good. Looking at the team matchup, you can pretty much tell that it's going to be Sun versus Sand, with Charizard Y setting up the Sun for that Venusaur and Emboar, and also Matt's team where the Tyranitar can set up the Sand for both Fortress and Bronzong. So yeah, looking at the type of strategies that each one used, the Reshirams used a very interesting Bronzong set. It was a heat-proof Bronzong with safety goggles. Now, it was pretty smart to have heat-proof because of how fire-dominant the other team would probably be, but also safety goggles just for that Venusaur. And it also worked very well against that Charizard Y because it had Rock Slide. Trying to think what else happened. Trev decided to use a rather bulky Greninja set which had Spikes and Taunt. It worked pretty well in the beginning of the battle. And Trev used an Emboar while the Reshirams used an Infernape. And I think in this battle, both of them pretty much hit like trucks. Like, I think Matt used a mixed Infernape with Close Combat and Overheat, while Trev used a Choice Band Reckless Emboar with Head Smash and I think another really powerful Fire-type move, which definitely should not be underestimated. Reckless Emboar with Choice Band is pretty freaking scary. That was the other thing that happened. Trev used a physical Charizard Y set. Like, it had Flare Blitz, it had Brick Break on it. I mean, I can kind of see why he had Brick Break on it, I guess possibly for the Tyranitar, but I just don't think it really showed the best potential that Charizard Y could have. I mean, it's certainly creative, but I think it could have been better. I just don't think Charizard Y should be that much of a physical threat. So, toward the end of the battle, it was pretty much the Reshiram's, Salamence and Tyranitar versus, I want to say Charizard Y at the end of the battle, or Venusaur, and the Reshiram just managed to wear the last Pokemon down on Trev's side successfully, which resulted in a 2-0 victory for the Reshiram's. Moving on to the next battle, we have the Washington Charizards versus the Oakland Rose Raiders. Looking at the team matchup, it looks like a very unfavorable matchup for the Rose Raiders in this case. You can kind of tell the Rose Raiders came to this battle expecting a range strategy from the Charizard's team, but instead it's, well, besides the fact that it's mostly a green colored theme team, they mostly have flying Pokemon and ground and steel types, which are really strong against the Rose Raiders team. I mean, Mega Lopunny in this battle would probably not be able to do much, especially with that Tornadus T, Tangrowth, and especially Crobat. While at the same time, the Rose Raiders team is especially weak to Tornadus T and Crocodile, with both exposing it both with ground and flying moves that can hit Lopunny, Magneton, Arcanine, and Roserade pretty easily. So all in all, it just looks like a very one-sided match. I mean, one team does not match up well at all against the other. Going into the battle, the Charizards used a Taunt Super Fang Crobat that actually worked out pretty well for the most part of the battle, even though the Rose Raiders had a Wishing Florges that kept healing off the Super Fang damage. He was able to have really good control of the playing field with that Crobat, controlling like which Pokemon is going to switch out and what to switch into, expecting that switch out. As for the Rose Raiders, they used an interesting Mega Lopunny set. They had Healing Wish on Lopunny, which was, I don't know, I guess it was good on their part, considering how Lopunny doesn't match up too well against his team. And even so, he Healing Wished his Lopunny into Roserade, which fully healed it. Roserade in this battle, it would have done well if it didn't also have a bad matchup against the likes of Scizor, Tornadus T, and also Crobat. I mean, Roserade was a pretty good choice for taking on that Tangrowth and possibly Crocodile if it was able to outspeed it or not. I'm not too sure. All in all though, Tornadus T and Crocodile did a pretty nice job of cleaning up the Rose Raiders team, especially with that Crobat in the background supporting it with moves like with Taunt and Super Fang to be able to freely whittle down the HP of the Pokemon on the other side of the field. So, I do think that this battle came down strictly down to team matchup. I mean, the Rose Raiders were at a pretty big disadvantage just looking at how all the overall types match up with each other. So, Tornadus T and Crocodile ended up working very well together in this battle, and this ended with the Charizards walking away with a solid 5-0 victory. Moving on to the last battle. Lastly, we have the Colorado Avelox versus the Portland Timbers. Just like a couple other of these battles, this was a sweep. I'm not going to have much to say about this battle. Looking at the team matchup, Togvar has brought all of his favorite Pokemon to the field, such as Mega Gardevoir, Cresselia, and Melodic, while Foghorn has brought some of his common Pokemon, such as Rotom-Wash, Mew, and Hoopa Unbound. Just looking at how both teams match up against each other, Hoopa Unbound can do a lot of damage to the Timbers team, while likewise, Mega Gardevoir can really hurt some Pokemon on the other side of the field, as well as Scizor if it manages to set up. Looking at the Pokemon's movesets though, the Timbers brought a Signal Beam Cresselia just for that Hoopa Unbound, which was really good planning on their part. As I was watching this battle, that Signal Beam was doing nearly, if not at 50% health to Hoopa Unbound per hit. Now, I don't know if that was a roll or not, but it ended up being a straight up 2-hit KO for Cresselia on that Hoopa Unbound, which definitely hurt the Avelox team because that Hoopa Unbound would have been really useful against the other Pokemon on Toge's team. Getting later into the battle though, I think it was Mew versus Scizor, and this Mew this Mew ran a different kind of set. It was like the typical, what's it called? It was like a typical stall Mew, but instead of Will-O-Wisp, it had Toxic. So, I mean, Toxic Stall Mew would have been great against the Timbers team if it didn't have Scizor, of course. Scizor was definitely the biggest problem for the Avelox team, because midway through the battle, it was Mew versus Scizor, and since Mew didn't have Will-O-Wisp, it just allowed the Scizor to set up free Swords dances. And as soon as the Avelox switched in Rotom Wash, the other Pokemon that could use Will-O-Wisp, it was already too late, and it just easily went down to Scizor. So, all in all, I mean, Scizor got set up and swept with things like Bullet Punch, Bug Bite, and yeah, it did eventually get taken out by, I forgot which one it was, let me check. It did eventually get taken out by the Mew with a Psychic attack, but that just ended up getting ultimately revenge killed by Toge's Mega Gardevoir in the very end. So, this resulted in a 5-0 victory for the Portland Timbers. And that concludes the Week 8 Sweep and Hacks edition of the NPL. I am your host, Dave. Hopefully I'll have more stuff to say next time. But anyway, take care.